just take it from there. I
5,
mean,
4,
look, if
3.
you don't, it's not a matter of exactly starting there, but the fact is today, now you just about got into this whole space where you are kind now going to work on maritime law, and you've gone to someone to start that process off, and someone has recommended you. That's where we were.
Yeah. Um, yes, it was. I mean, it was a really enjoyable year in France. First, it has to be said, uh, I I know that many Brits struggle with the French. I actually like the French mentality. They're more individualistic. I think uh, it's an environment I enjoy, and I certainly enjoyed that year in France. And it also set me off in a new direction in that, before that year, I was due to join a traditional magic circle firm, practicing, all sorts of things, but certainly not maritime law. And it was thanks to that brilliant maritime law professor in France that I turned right at the T junction instead of left. And Pierre Bonacieux, I forget whether I recounted the phone call. I think I did, with the leading maritime lawyer in Paris, who said, "Well, Pierre, if you're recommending this guy, of course I'll take him." And then I thought, well, okay, the Law Society in England set time limits within which you had to qualify. And I thought, okay, I better go back to the UK, qualify. And so I started with what was said to be the leading maritime law firm in the UK, a firm called Ince. And actually, I spent the whole of my career as a solicitor with Ince & Co. It was a fantastic law firm. It quite small when I joined, probably no more than about 10, 12 partners. I mean, by the time I left, it was in excess of 100 partners. But it was, it was quite small, but very dynamic. Um, uh, International cases galore. All my work pretty much was international. And it was an exciting place to be because we got the instructions from, the biggest ship owners, insurers, shipbuilders, and so on. So anything that was fizzy, any major ship casualties, pollution incidents, from Torrey Canyon onwards, would tend to end up with Ince & Co. So it was a fun place to be.
Tell me, Jonathan, the maritime industry, I mean, the maritime world had to have systems of dispute resolution, and mediation would have been part of it in the history. Did you see that kind of attitude in the industry between people?
No. Um, Firstly, I think the default dispute resolution procedure for the maritime law world was arbitration.
Yeah.
And anecdotally, I can tell you, because there are some studies that, and there's an audit done, I think every year or every 2 years, that extraordinarily, still today, something like 85%, I think it is, of worldwide maritime disputes are dealt with in London. So, London is very much the place to be if you want to practice maritime law.
Because I
And
just thought,
most of those disputes, not exclusively, most of them are dealt with by arbitration. There's also a very efficient English commercial court and a very efficient admiralty court. So, those cases, there are some, for example, charter parties which provide for, say, that any dispute to be dealt with by the English commercial court. But the overwhelming majority, it's arbitration.
Well, I was looking at the historical aspect that Giovanni in his presentation had brought out,
Hmm.
because from that I got this feeling that there was history of mediation in that world. I mean, now is it between the ship owners and the users, or is it between just the merchants? I don't know, but there is a
Okay,
history.
look, I can tell you, you're right in a sense. If you're asking, was there anything formally called mediation in the maritime world before the last 30, 40, maybe 50 years? The answer is no, but informally, yes. So the origins of arbitration, maritime arbitration, were that on the floor of the Baltic Exchange, which was one of the leading maritime institutions, maritime trade was conducted on the floor of the Baltic Exchange. And if two parties were in dispute, it's quite likely that they would say, well, we both know Fred, that older guy, Fred. We both trust Fred. Why don't we just go talk with Fred and see what he has to say? And so each would, quite informally, um, put their case, as it were, to Fred. And Fred, having heard each of them, maybe having asked a few questions on the way, would say, well, you know what, I think the position is this. Now, he's not deciding, he's steering, and very often that steer would be all that was needed to bring about a resolution. And I'm sure there was a lot of that going on. Also, there are all the broking communities, for ship fixtures, ship brokers who are chartering out vessels for their principals, brokers who are arranging ship sale and purchase, and so on. Those brokers, part of their mandate was to smooth the waters between the respective principals. So if a dispute broke out in relation to a fixture between the ship owner and charterer, that ship broker for sure would do his, or in those days it was mostly him rather than her, but they do their best to let's say broker a resolution. And again, that's not a decided, an adjudicative outcome, that's a facilitated resolution. So of course, and I remember, I don't know, stop me if I told you this, but one of my very early, please do stop me if I'm repeating myself, but one of my very early arbitration cases as a baby lawyer, I can still remember the underlying issue. I was acting for Greek interests, I think, and there was another leading shipping firm acting for Chinese interests. And the arbitration clause said arbitration in London according to British law. And I'm the baby lawyer acting for the Greek interests. And actually, it was either the senior partner or one of the very senior partners in this other firm who is acting for the Chinese interests. And my opponent was saying that the arbitration, I started arbitration proceedings, and he was saying the arbitration clause is void for ambiguity because there is no such thing as British law. And I said in the nicest of terms that that was absolute rubbish, because even without any reference to a specific law, simply providing arbitration London would arguably make English law the applicable law without having to say more. So how could it be worse if you've specified British law? So that's the issue. We go before, the two of us, before the arbitrator who was one of the two leading arbitrators in London at the time. Delightful gentleman. Cedric Barclay is his name. Spoke about 10 languages, Armenian, I think, by origin. Wonderful man. So we have an early evening appointment. What does he do? He pulls out a bottle of claret. We sit down, drink some wine, talk about everything apart from the case, then and have a very nice discussion. And we've the senior partner and I have got to know each other a bit. We're, relaxed and enjoying the conversation. And then Cedric turns to both of us and he said, "I've thought about it. I think this clause is workable. Don't you, Peter?" Let's say the guy on the other side is called Peter. And Peter looks and says, "But isn't there, no, Peter, I've thought about this. It works, doesn't it?" And, before Peter knew what was happening, Cedric had effectively massaged the situation so that we had an agreed outcome. We may well have polished off a second bottle of the good claret. I can't remember now. But, that was a brilliant style, a brilliant way to behave, rather than what most arbitrators would have done. So Peter, or Mr. Jones, whatever his name was, make your case as to why the clause is unenforceable. Then Mr. Lux, make your case as to why it's enforceable. I decide, the arbitrator, decide X, Y, or Z. How much nicer the approach adopted by Cedric. So yes, of course, there have been, no doubt for centuries, people operating in the way that Cedric operated that evening and bringing about successful outcomes. But I don't think there was any formal mediation process in the maritime space. And it's to be remembered that because, the Industrial Revolution effectively starts in the British Empire, in this country, at the time of the British Empire. And it really was the case at the time that the sun never set on the British Empire. It was so huge. Today, of course, the sun hardly rises on the British Empire, or what's left, England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, even them for how much longer? There's now talk of the breakup of the United Kingdom. But anyway, at the time, the British Empire was huge, obviously London right at the center of that. And so, to the great good fortune of later generations of maritime lawyers, including myself, that meant that England had, the UK had a decisive say in the shape of international maritime law, because a lot of the international conventions which came into force, late 1800s, 1900s, England had the whip hand, if you like, in terms of the shape of those conventions and, the shape, the terms of those conventions.
Tell me, Jonathan, now, of course, you said that you're part of this law firm and it grew, but this is like taking it too fast. I mean, what was really happening in your life during that time? And of course, you'll have to take us through some interesting cases that you did. That's obviously part of it. But what's happening in your personal life all this time? Now you just started working. This is a long duration of time we're talking about.
Yeah, it's life was good. Getting married, having children, having a dynamic and very interesting working life. The gods were shining on me
Yeah,
at the
at
time,
least
and
if yeah, if not
it
on the
was
British Empire, they were shining on you at least.
yeah, it was very nice. It was, you know, I look back with there was some hugely. I don't know whether I told you again when I was at university. The my professor said, "Oh, you should go to the bar. You know, advocacy is your thing." And I thought about it long and hard, but I thought actually no. What particularly attracted me, and especially in the international context, was the opportunities as international solicitor was to go out, travel, literally travel around the world on particular cases and meeting people of so many different cultures from so many different backgrounds, you know, from uh, sailors to chief engineers to ship's masters to the commercial people, the insurance world, the traders. You know, it was um, a really wide array of people in a huge number of different jurisdictions. And that's one of the reasons why, when many years later the International Mediation Institute said, we're going to hold actually our very first course on intercultural accreditation in the UK, I said, yep, I will sign up for that for sure, because intercultural issues, I think, are hugely interesting.
But you have to, yeah, but you have to take us through that. This is like what you've done is in one or two or three sentences, you've taken a large part of your life into in that. There's so much that's happened. You have to tell us some interesting cross-cultural experiences, where all you had work took you, where all holiday, what holidays you took, something. Tell us more about your life. The idea is to know more about you.
Well, you know, I hope this, normally getting to know is a personal thing, face to face, in the pub, in the restaurant, in the club, you know, and there's a human element to that. Of course, much more difficult over a computer screen. Um, but yeah, what can I say that
Let's go
uh,
backwards. Let's go backwards. Now you just got into this firm and you've just started working. What is the atmosphere like? What are the other people like? Let's start from there. Because look, as I can notice, work has been the predominant activity in your life. Leisure might not have been too much over a number of years. As I can understand. Now you'll have to tell us that. But if we have to talk about work, then we have to talk about work, which I
no,
would.
no, actually, you know, there certainly were those in the law firm who were obsessive about their work to the point that they literally didn't take holidays. I was not one of those. Um, Something that mixes work and holiday, perhaps a nice little tale. Um, I was instructed as, I forget whether as a senior assistant or very junior partner in the firm, and by a German individual. Can you bear with me just one
Yeah, yeah,
moment?
please,
There's
please.
just something, I won't be a second. Sorry, Vikram. So, yeah, it sort of combines work and pleasure. I was instructed by a German individual who lived in a small town in Germany, extremely wealthy gentleman who had all sorts of business interests. He owned hotels, restaurants around the world, um, amongst other things. And he decided at a certain point, um, you may remember years back, it was traditionally wealthy Arab businessmen who wanted super yachts designed for them. And then it was super rich Russians, the same, Abramovich and so on. Anyway, this German gentleman decided that he wanted, if you like, a super yacht for the Mediterranean, which has draft limitations. So it was not going to be the same dimensions as a yacht for, worldwide travel. It was predominantly for the Mediterranean. And there were two key criteria that he wanted met. The first was that the motor yacht was supposed to plane on the water. So you power up and it's planing along on top of the water rather than plowing through the waves. And secondly, it was supposed to be able to cruise at an average speed of 30 knots or more. So my German client had instructed a German shipyard, and here's where the rub came. He instructed an English naval architect who was famous for designing yachts for the super rich. And that English naval architect subcontracted the performance aspects to a former world powerboat champion. So let's call him DS. Those were his initials. DS is the performance aspects. And actually, the case was incredibly simple because the German wanted super luxury, gold taps, onyx bars, whatever. And DS was used to winning, performance boat championships. But of course, those vessels were all engine and no superstructure. I mean, very little apart from the engine. And so DS completely miscalculated the weights involved. And it ended up that this prototype super luxury high performance yacht plowed through the water at a speed no greater than about 15 knots, which many tramp vessels can easily achieve, and at an angle that bore no relation to the, desired planing on the water. Now, my German friend, and I'm not a psychologist, of course, also had some angst because he was half worried that perhaps this was a plot against the Germans, shades of Faulty Towers, don't mention the war. So there was this suspicion. And I think when he instructed me, English lawyer, he was half wondering to himself whether he could get, independent, top-notch representation from a co-national of the main defendant, the English naval architect. Anyway, to cut a long story short, a settlement was achieved. So I was able to get the case settled by the English naval architect and DS to the satisfaction of the German. And in fact, it's one of my favorite cases for this reason, that about a year after the case was settled, the English naval architect was having the 10th anniversary of, his work, his major work as naval architect. And the only lawyer to be invited to this 10th anniversary party was myself. Now, the case was long since over, so I didn't ask and didn't have to ask why his lawyer of, a couple of years earlier had not been invited along. But I just found it, really quite a nice gesture that he would invite me to that 10th anniversary celebration. The German client was so delighted that he had secured the high level of settlement that was achieved that he invited me and my family to stay for as long as we wanted the following summer at any one of his hotels around the world. And so I talked with the family and we picked a hotel in Mallorca, a beautiful boutique hotel, which was just maybe less than a dozen suites and a golf course around the hotel, and, absolutely idyllic. And actually that then, this case threw up a number of things. I've recounted some of them already. But my first issue was, I thought I ought to go to the senior partner of the law firm and explain what had just been offered. So the senior partner, who was a Scottish gentleman, and I'm sure not deserved, but some say the Scots are a little on the mean side. And many Scots I've met, by the way, are the reverse. But anyway, the first thing that Donald said to me was, aha, he has not paid our bill for the work. And I said, absolutely wrong, Donald. I have never in my life had a bill paid so quickly. At that time, it was customary. We didn't go in for advance billing. You tended to bill at the end of the case. And most clients were honorable and they paid the bill. Maybe not immediately, but this bill was paid absolutely immediately. So Donald's next tack was to say, well, this is a partnership perk, so it's to be divided amongst the partners. I said, well, Donald, you're forgetting one point. I am not a partner in the firm yet. And so he then scratched his head and acknowledged that he couldn't think of any good reason why I shouldn't take what had been offered. And that's indeed what I did. And then, we arrive at the airport in Mallorca, and there's a gentleman in a peaked cap with our name. And so I said, yes, I'm Mr. Lux. He said, okay, Mr. X, my German client, has instructed me to hand you the keys to the car, which will be yours for the duration of your stay. And outside is a gleaming Mercedes, which we drive over to the hotel. And then I thought, well, okay, he's been so kind, car, hotel stay. We can really splash out on the drinks and food menus. At least there I'll be picking up the tab. So, glorious wines and food for the duration of our stay. And I, on checkout, asked for the bill, and the checkout clerk said, no, it's taken care of. So I asked to see the manager, and the manager said to me, Mr. X has given me clear instructions. You are not to pay a thing. So, I mean, I've never before or since had such a generous present from a client. Certainly one that I was able, indeed encouraged, to accept. So it brought out, a few nice aspects, conflicts and client gratitude, and the role of senior partners, and also how you can achieve a resolution and not necessarily by, beating up the opposition.
Yeah, exactly. That's the important part. People appreciate that. I mean, they understand that. Finally,
Yeah,
no one at the end of the day wants to do that. It's just that either they pushed into it, and and lawyers add to that. They add to that. I mean, for whatever reason, it's not a good thing the way they go about it. So we also are to blame. Some of us are to blame for that also. This
yeah,
should not be a war. It's not a war. It's two people in conflict, in a dispute. Help them. But for some
yeah,
reason, that did not happen that way. That
yeah.
also maybe you can tell us, because have you seen the same attitude when you were, I mean, because now we know, yes, it's reached that kind of a peak level. But is that the attitude it was that when you started off in the profession?
No, I mean, the attitude was that uh, in representing your client's interests, and by the way, INS was very unusual in several respects, um, but the one I'm about to mention in particular, it was not departmentalized. So many law firms, you had the litigation specialist, the arbitration specialist, the, if you like, subject matter specialist. Um, we were much more cross-threaded. So, I would deal with, as would anyone else in the firm, with the case from pretty much from start to finish. If it involved negotiation, you conducted the negotiations. If it involved arbitration, litigation, if you had to mug up on, what are um, exhaust gas separators, you mugged up on what are exhaust gas separators, so you could go right into the nuts and bolts of the case. Um, so, because we were quite cross-threaded, um, we made it our business. I think in every case, I can honestly say that when I was working as baby lawyer, as assistant, as partner in the firm, I didn't feel like I'm working for money. Where is the next bill? What's the next bill I can put in? Bills were incidental. And by the way, there was also a costs department. So if I didn't feel like preparing my own bills, I could broadly get them prepared by the cost department. And as it was one of my least favorite tasks, I often did that. So I could focus on the, if you like, case handling work. And yeah, your job, your attitude was that to identify your client's interests and best serve those interests, of course, uh, within the rules of court. So observing professional etiquette and so on.
Mhm.
But that meant that in most cases, your client's best interest was served by settlement. It was quite rare that a client would say, take the other side to the cleaners, come what may. Occasionally it might happen, or sometimes with an institutional client. Occasionally they may say, we really need an authoritative determination of what a particular clause in a contract means. So we need a court decision on this because there are 500 other matters on which this turns. So occasionally, but in most cases, your client's best interest meant doing what you could to settle. So that was where that was the interest. That was always the endeavor.
Mhm.
And often you had, because the maritime world was quite a small world, we knew each other. And I knew very well if today I'm acting for the claimant, tomorrow against, um, an opponent called X, tomorrow he might be acting for the claimant and I might be acting for the defendant. So, London, unlike New York, was not so sectoral. So each of us could act for pretty much any interests involved in the international trade, maritime aviation spaces. So in most cases, you would be able to collaborate with your opponent to negotiate resolution of the case. And there were two ways you could do it. Sometimes it was even better to do so without express instructions from the client. Sounds extraordinary, but let's say you're the lawyer on the other side. I think we've got a strong case, but my client's best interest is to settle it as soon as possible. So I pick up the phone to you. I say, Vikram, may we speak without prejudice? Why don't we both meet up? How about, a week from now, let's meet up at your office, my office, and just talk without prejudice to examine what may be the settlement possibilities here. I'm without instructions at the moment, and if you're likewise without instructions, what we will end up with, hopefully, is a joint agreement to recommend. So we've discussed the case fully, and you say to me, and we agree at the end of that discussion, you say, okay, Jonathan, in light of this, I'm going to recommend my client to pay X. And I say, yep, that's great. I'm going to make the same recommendation. And generally, if we've both done our jobs thoroughly, the clients would listen. They've retained us to examine all the facts and matters, do the research. So provided we've done the job thoroughly, they're very likely to say amen to what we come up with. So most cases, the great majority would be resolved in that sort of way.
So the important thing that comes out from that is at least that there was that much trust in the lawyers that if they are coming with a recommendation or a suggestion, they are not in any way, they don't have a vested interest in it. They're actually wanting to settle. So that was a good thing.
I can give you an example, Vikram. I used to do quite a lot of work also for various Indian interests. And there was a major Indian corporation where I advised the client that his defense to a claim was extremely weak. And I recommended to my Indian client that I be authorized to conduct settlement negotiations with the opposition. And I said, look, it's a no-brainer. If this case goes ahead, I predict you will lose. Having looked at all the evidence, done all the research, I predict you will lose. And if it goes all the way, there's going to be 100,000 in costs on top, because it was a big case, lots of issues and so on. Lots of things that could be said, but I thought we were on the wrong side on most, if not all of them. And my Indian client, very nice gentleman, had become more or less a friend. We'd get together when he was in London. And he had all sorts of business in London, so it was, fairly regularly. He said to me, Jonathan, what you've just suggested is impossible. In my company, it will be suspected that there is corruption involved. We have on every floor anti-corruption officers. And I'm sorry to say, but I'm going to have to instruct you to defend this case, even though I understand, and you've told me that we will probably lose. We're going to have to go ahead, defend it, because otherwise I will, face so many questions, so much flack as to whether, what was going on behind the scenes.
So that's what I'm saying, that basic mistrust in lawyers, it shows that the culture in India was what that person would have looked at and thought about, and that's how the organization would have looked at it. So it's a very cultural thing. So I mean, we as lawyers have that role to play, but if we go about doing this and that mistrust develops, it's not a good thing for the people who come to us, and it's not good for the profession also.
No, absolutely. And I did volunteer. I mean, I was very keen to explore with him, and he was a senior lawyer in that major company, bright, resourceful, and so on. I said to him, might it help if I were to accompany you at a meeting in India at your head office with the relevant people, where I can set out precise chapter and verse on why I'm recommending settlement and the advantages of that compared with the probability of going down in flames. And he thought about it. He said, unfortunately, it's not going to work, and you're going to have to defend the case. And we defended, and we lost. And he was happy in the sense that we'd gone through the hoops.
Yeah, but it's a sad thing that has to
It's
happen.
sad. It's
Yeah,
sad. And it's the sort of case, I mentioned the German case, which you come away from with a great feeling of warmth and contentment because you feel you've done a good job, you achieved something that the client was happy with. In the case I've just described, of course, you don't have any good feeling about it.
yeah.
It's a nonsense, really, that uh, your professional skills have served no useful purpose because they could have gone down in flames without, without having to have me there.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that
But
this is something. Look, like I said, lawyers have created that. Because of them is why this happened.
yeah,
Because definitely it's an issue with the profession. So I see you looking at your watch, 2 minutes to go. Yes, I can see it. So now we have we moved forward or not? I'm just thinking, have we really moved forward, or we have to? Of course, look, it's nice just having a conversation with you. So now the evolution of Mediator has become a matter of conversations with you. So not a problem. It's nice. We can do it again whenever you have time. We can do it again, because I don't think that we're going to get too much in the next 1 or 2 minutes more into what was happening. As long if you give me more time, I'm happy. But
Vikram, look, if you feel, um, look, I admire the things you're doing, Vikram, and so if you feel that this is serving a useful purpose, to record conversations with me, then I'm happy to keep talking with you on the basis we do record or on the basis we don't record, as you prefer. But as mentioned, I do have to go at
yeah,
one. So if you want to schedule another occasion, by all means, send me some proposed dates and times.
well,
And
let's do it on what? Let's do it on 9th of October. But 9th
9th
of
of
October, yeah.
October.
Because I'll tell
Uh,
you why these conversations are important. One is, of course, getting into the life of a person who's got that mindset. The main thing is that the person has that mindset. That by itself is important.
yeah, yeah. Um, okay. I'm got a big arbitration starting on the Monday, but no, an hour on the 9th should be fine.
Can
And
we?
by the way, just to mention, you said earlier, sorry, I'll come back to that. So when would you prefer on 9th October? Do you want
That's
to go
okay.
back
Look, I always. I mean,
12 noon? Is that all right?
yeah, it's okay. I mean, if you can, we want to keep it earlier. I'm happier earlier because look, evening right now is golf time actually,
Okay.
but not an issue. I mean, we'll take it as you what you prefer, but try and keep it a little longer. Do you think you can keep it longer than an hour?
I'll tell you the problem on 9th October. I've got a big arbitration starting the following week. Um, so time is going to be tight because in the usual way, the parties will submerge me in documents, um, at the last minute. And so I'm really going to be up against it. But an hour I can certainly cut out. So what's your preferred time? Do you want to do it 10 a.m.
Yeah,
London
that's good.
time?
That's good. That's good. You still haven't.
Okay.
You won't move to GMT, na? What did we checked last time? It was the end of October that you're moving to GMT.
I think so.
Mhm.
I think so. But we can check nearer the time. Whatever it is, 10 a.m. will be, um, if it means, if you, yeah.
Perfect. So I think that we can check. So not a problem.
Okay.
But so purpose, like I'm telling you, the purpose is that finally there are not too many people who have that mindset moving from litigation or arbitration, wanting to move to mediation and being a mediator. Not everyone has that. So there is something special there. So let's have a conversation with someone who's thought that, and let other people relate to it and relate to the person. But here we'll have to get more into the person a little more. We haven't got dug deep enough, so we get into that. But it's just a nice thing to have you out there having that conversation, because maybe, like I said, you'll be a lot of you could talk to everyone. I was telling Tat also today. Maybe you don't realize that there is something special if you are looking at being a mediator, because
Mm,
today obviously there is not enough money for it to attract people.
mhm.
The day there is, everyone's going to be up there. No one's going to leave it. But
Yeah, no, it's funny you mentioned that, but because actually I've sort of made a decision. You said earlier, right at the beginning, that you, in fact, before we started recording, I think that you put your if you like, livelihood on the line. You're acting as mediator only, whereas I'm acting as both mediator and arbitrator.
yeah,
That's true, but unbeknownst to you, I've actually taken the decision that I am henceforth going to slowly steer things towards mediation much more. So I expect, because of the way that I'm handling things, that slowly, the arbitration work is going to decrease, and hopefully the mediation work will
definitely will.
correspondingly increase. But
Because I'm saying, yeah, yeah.
that's a decision I've taken because I think, yeah, one needs to be focused, and it's easier to be focused if that is your your key focus.
Yeah, and the important thing, like I'm saying, that there is a lot of work there. For me, I obviously have that work-life balance situation, so I don't pick up everything that comes my way. But I'm saying there's enough work there. I mean, that's not an issue. The main thing is the mindset. Some people just enjoy going to court or into that adversary. That's what gives them a high. To take them out of that, maybe they don't even have that mindset to want to mediate. So it's not for everyone. I'm saying it's not for everyone. To think that everyone might tomorrow think that no, we should all become mediators, they can't do it. So
Yeah,
just the fact that you have that mindset is a special thing, and we need to be wanted to be out there. So anyway, so we're
just
meeting on 10 o'clock. Yeah, 10 on 9th of October. We're meeting at 10, 9th of October, 9, 10 London time.
look
And we
forward to it. And obviously, if anything comes up in the interim, hopefully, we'll have other occasions to.
no, definitely. Oh,
Uh,
yes, you have to come on the last day of the symposium for sure. The
yeah,
last day is for, I mean, 5:30 p.m. India time. We start discussion on the key learning and takeaways from the symposium.
remind
So
me, what date is that?
30th of September. We have two parts of it. One is the 11 to 1, which might be too early for you. And
Mhm.
then it's 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. India time. So so basically that'll be 1 o'clock to, it's basically start at 1 o'clock your time. And then we have Professor Sukh Simranjit Singh, his
Mm.
closing address at 8 o'clock. So please keep time, because we
Yep.
just try, because look, like I was telling that also, the fact is that you people would not be able to go through all the sessions. There are already 84 already done. So
Yep.
now you definitely, but I've sat in all of them. So what has come out if in front of me, I'll take that forward and discuss with you, and you can give your suggestions and the way forward and all. So please keep some time out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Vikram, a great pleasure. And we stay in touch.
Yes, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.